Today, Kristin is going to come up here and she is going to share with you how divine legends helped her know it was time to pivot her career, and how sometimes life's biggest challenges can be the beginning of something beautiful. Everybody help me welcome Kristin Dickerson.
Bring it in!
Thank you. I love you.
Thank you. Look at this. I get walk-up music. How cool is that? So fun. Let me get organized right quick. I got a clicker and a handkerchief for my eyes and my armpits. So there's that. It's so nice to be here with you. And Karen, my goodness. I love love. I love friends and I love support. And I really appreciate you for following my journey and for speaking my name into the room of women that was organizing this event. Sometimes that's all it takes, to just speak someone's name into a room and see what happens. That was 6 months ago. So in a very uncreepy way, I have been thinking about you all for like 6 months. What am I going to tell them? How am I, which stories am I going to tell? So to be here, it's really an honor. So thank you. I want to introduce someone to you if you haven't met him yet, and I'm going to be mentioning him. My husband, Peter, in the very back of the room. Give it up for Peter. Yeah, Pete. In the simplest form, my day job is helping amazing people tell their stories. I have done this job in various forms for 18 years, serving as a news anchor, a news reporter, and now a lifestyle television host. Now, what I'm relatively new to is telling my own story, and it is something that I don't take lightly. 1 year and 2 months ago, I was in an accident that injured my throat, and it took my voice. It's been a beautiful year of healing, but now being able to stand in front of you and share a message that comes from my heart, moves up through this healed throat, is pushed out with my breath, and into you, your ears, and into your heart. It's something I do not take for granted. And my goal today, my prayer from the very beginning of sharing my journey, is that these stories remind you of what you already know. And that part is up to you. So let's get to it. My first story is about the first time that I really had a significant pivot in my life, in my career, in my faith walk. If you're doing all of those things, they're all woven together, right? It's just one big journey. And I was working in Tulsa, Oklahoma, my first job, and I had made it a goal to win my very first Emmy Award. And if I won this in the anchor category, that means I was the best in my universe. But it also meant that I thought it would mean that I was finally good enough at doing my job. So I set out to win this one award. And to do so, I knew I had studied it, so I knew what I needed to apply for the award. I needed to show that I was an anchor who could do all these things like cover breaking weather. In Oklahoma, a lot of breaking weather happens. Severe storm starts to hit. Selfishly, this is my opportunity. I go out to cover flooding. Would you believe that right before we went live, the flood I was covering seemed to disappear? And then the camera fogged up because of the humidity, and I couldn't be seen. I wasn't even there. And then the live truck broke. They couldn't get my shot. All day, this is 3 solid newscasts, 3 hours of coverage. Wasn't on air for a lick of it. So I'm driving to meditation that night, and I found that as soon as you have the question, the answer will come. My question was, God, what's the deal? What am I missing? And then in an instant, as soon as I said that to myself, I had a memory from months before, and I had met a young girl in high school named Paige Park. And she had long, curly blonde hair and big blue eyes. And when I talked to her, she just kind of sparkled, like she radiated, but it wasn't the glitter on her cheeks, it was something deep within. And I was like, what is the deal with this girl? There's got to be a story here. When I remembered Paige Park, I realized that whenever I made the goal to be the best anchor of the universe, I also started getting nudges from the universe, telling me to become a photographer. So instead of being in front of the camera and my world revolves around me, I would now use my spotlight and shine it on somebody else. I would be behind the camera, which is challenging because I didn't know how to do it. So whenever I met Paige, I thought, gosh, I bet she has a great story. I was being called to tell that story, but it was difficult, so I avoided it, I ignored it, until that moment driving to that meditation. The next day, I was like, I gotta track down this high school kid. I called her principal, got her phone number, and that means I get to hit the clicker for the first time today and share with you our story about Paige Park, the first time I finally listened to myself and the divine nudges to be a photographer.
Finding your calling can be a lifelong quest, but some are fortunate to hear it early. Paige Park, her parents introduced her to the violin, growing up playing in their family bluegrass band.
6 years old, we all started learning instruments.
Over the years, she's earned a list of honors, including All National Honor Symphony Orchestra. But accolades are far from her goal.
You know, I've been blessed by watching people play, seeing people perform. Sometimes it's really touched my heart. I just hope that I also touch someone's heart when I play.
Her faith also plays a role in her sound. The same year she started playing music, she also committed her life to Jesus Christ.
I built my world around you, I need you so.
Finding harmony in her craft while seeking her spiritual purpose.
You don't need me, oh no. I've just, through high school, been asking God, where He wanted me to go, what He wanted me to do, because it might not be violin.
Her musical path confirmed by a spiritual presence felt while performing, singing the words, "Fill all the world with joyful sound."
It was hard for me not to cry on stage. I was trying as hard as I could. I felt God's presence in. I know that He wants me to fill the world with joyful sound.
An opportunity to do just that presented itself at church, a mission trip to Malawi, Africa. Welcomed by the music of villagers, not knowing Paige brought some of her own.
You know, they've never seen a violin, and it's a gift God has given me.
They came from neighboring communities to witness Paige fill the world with joyful sound. She's now traveled to Malawi 3 times, playing while sharing the gospel. New this year, a hymn Paige composed for the villagers.
This is John 4:16 in Chichewa, which is the native language of Malawi. Yesu ananena naye, inendine jera di kunari di moyo, alibe mutuaza kwa tateko moyo.
Making friends a world away, hoping to share God's love by fulfilling her purpose to fill all the world with joyful sound.
It'll bring people together. It brings people together, different cultures, different religions. It's cool in music. You don't have to translate. You just play, and they understand it right there, and in a way that unites everyone.
Don't you just love her? Can we give it up for Paige Park? Out in the universe somewhere. Last we found, she was in Nashville working in a violin shop and just continuing to spread her love and joy. So the initial goal I had was I wanted to win an Emmy Award to prove that I would finally be good enough. Divine nudges said, go in a different direction. I dragged my feet, finally listened. That story about Paige Park started a series of stories that I shot about people of different religions and how they walk in their faith, how they live in their faith every single day. And that series earned me my very first Emmy Award. Look at that! Looking back at it now, it's like God was showing me that success wouldn't come if I made it about myself. It took me about focusing on how I could help others and shine the light on them that success finally came. That series also helped me get a job at NBC-5 in Dallas-Fort Worth, where this Emmy made some Emmy babies and attracted great success. Within a couple months of getting here, we won National Journalism Awards I never thought I would be capable of winning. Financial success, I'd never made as much money in my life as working at NBC-5. Materially, all the goals were met. Fantastic success. But personally, sneak preview, everything around me was falling apart. My marriage was struggling because I was spending so much time at work and not pouring into my relationship with my husband. Work, although I was working all the time, one manager started to make everything in the newsroom unstable. So I wasn't secure at work. And then at home, we allowed a family member to move in with us for a month. 18 months later, we finally forced him to leave. But during that time, I never had the courage to simply say, it's time for you to go. So life was a wreck. Peter and I hit a breaking point. Just like your poor camera. I hope everything's okay. Peter and I hit a breaking point. I'm gonna go back one just for now. Peter and I hit a breaking point, and fortunately, we chose each other. We chose our relationship with God. And we started to dig ourselves out of this monster hole. So we got marriage counseling, and we started to release what was no longer serving us. And we started looking for guidance. Now, one thing we knew for sure was that we were at our happiest when we were side by side, walking together in nature. That was our happy place. So what next? We go to New York City for a journalism banquet and award ceremony. And the word Rome kept coming to us. It was on the tiny soaps and shampoos in the hotel. And then we went to the award ceremony, and somebody named Rome won an award. And then we're on our flight back, and the person sitting next to us was coming from Rome. Again, once you have the question, the answer will come. What's the deal, God? Am I supposed to roam? Is this what we're doing? So we sought counsel from my mentor. Her name is Yvonne Lewis. Today, she is a trauma therapist. She has also served as a minister, and she was also a news anchor for 30 years before she left her career to serve God. She also taught me early on in my faith walk, which came to me mid-20s. I didn't grow up going to church or grow up with a solid relationship with God. But in the newsroom, she taught me about how to detect the presence of the Holy Spirit, and about how if you put a question out there or if you hear something and it resonates with you, you get goosebumps either on your arms or your legs. And the way to strengthen that connection is by declaring it. When you detect it, you say, I feel you. I feel you. I feel this. I feel this on my legs. I feel this on my right arm. I feel you. We started to tell her about the word Rome, and also about the insecurities happening in other aspects of her life. And as soon as we mentioned Rome, before she declared it, we all had goosebumps all over. And she was like, get ready to roam, get light. So we sold our house, we moved into a tiny apartment next to work. The boss that was unstable, he got fired. There was lots of shifting happening. So we're like, all right, we're ready to road trip. Then I missed a period. That is the opposite of roaming. That is definitely not roaming, God. I was pregnant, and then I wasn't. Some things are easier to talk about when I read them. So if it's okay, I'd like to read this next thing to you. And whenever I wrote it, I was laying in bed. And I said, God, I'm not saying a word about this unless you tell me what to say. And immediately this message was dropped into my mind. So instead of saying, thank you, God, I said, crap, now I gotta get out of bed. And here's what I wrote. What I learned from having a miscarriage. In early November, my husband and I learned we were pregnant with our first child, a hope that had been underlying for the past 4 years. The end of December, we learned our pregnancy was likely going to end in a miscarriage. And on the 4th of January, it did. A friend told me months ago about a type of therapy that has you revisit something traumatic in your life, and you ask yourself, where was Jesus in the room? Just writing that question makes me cry, because in this case, he was everywhere. On the morning I'm writing this, I received a D&C, which basically removes the failed pregnancy at Texas Health Hughley Hospital. When I arrived, the top sheet of my check-in paperwork read, a prayer before surgery. Soon after, a chaplain came to pray with us. All of the doctors, nurses, and techs were as skilled at their jobs as they were kind and compassionate. After the surgery was over, a nurse gave me a handwritten note that said, Kristin, I'm sorry for what you've been through. I will be praying for you. Jesus was also in the room working through countless people who love us. A dear friend who talked and texted me through what to expect based on her own experience. My family quickly transitioning from requests for a baby girl to extra unconditional love. And managers at work making sure I had time to recover, both physically and emotionally. I'll admit, one night after learning a miscarriage was inevitable, I silently yelled at God and asked, why did this have to happen? Thankfully, those feelings of anger were replaced with peace by the next afternoon. Although I don't have a clear answer to my question, why, I do know that I am so grateful. I'm grateful that I woke up after anesthesia. I'm grateful for the man in the waiting room, holding my clothes in a plastic hospital bag, and texting my family that the doctor said everything went well. I'm also grateful that to me, this is a small struggle compared to what so many people have faced and are currently facing. Finally, I'm grateful for perspective. I've gained immense empathy for mothers and families who have suffered loss in this way. If you are one of them, this experience and a really kind nurse taught me how to offer my support by simply saying, I'm sorry for what you have been through, and I will be praying for you, because I will be. Almost 3 years before that, Yvonne had said that she saw herself in our lives until a baby was born. She had a vision of holding up the baby like in The Lion King. When I saw that a new version of The Lion King was going to be released in 2019, I immediately checked the movie release date. The date was the same day as the baby's due date, the baby that we had nicknamed Sesame. When that day arrived, Peter had planned a celebration, so we went to go see the movie and we came home, and we opened a box that Peter's mom sent us the day before. She didn't know the significance of the day. We didn't tell anybody. And she didn't know that we nicknamed the baby Sesame. We opened the box, and the only thing inside was a giant bag of sesame chips. A few weeks after the miscarriage surgery, I was still feeling a lot. I was anchoring a newscast on the weekend solo at NBC5, and it got to the second, we call it like a block of news. The second block of news is usually community-focused, happy stories, and then you toss to weather, and then sports, and that's it. And on this day, it was different. That usually happy block of news was filled with terrorism, it was filled with mass casualties because of weather abroad. And it felt the same as what Paige Park first explained to me, just an overwhelming feeling of presence. But for me, it wasn't with the words, "Fill all the world with joyful sound." The message that was dropped into my mind, clear as day, is, I'm doing this wrong. I realized that I had a platform to share the best of humanity, but on that day, I was sharing the worst. It felt like if I continued to share the worst, that a part of my spirit would darken. And I knew that if I was being called to share the best of humanity, then I better be the one to capture it. So we continued our efforts once again to roam, but to roam with purpose. We started our pivot with a pilgrimage to some of the holiest places on earth that we're allowed to go. It was going to be 98 days, starting with walking across the Camino de Santiago. It starts in France, and you walk all the way across Spain. It's 500 miles. And our intention with this pilgrimage was that we would take camera gear, 30-ish plus pounds in our backpack, and we would document it and share it with people who physically are not able to walk across the country. And so as soon as that was planned, I call it the flow. We entered the flow when it seemed like the entire universe was working in our favor to help us prepare for this epic journey. It was like going to open a window and a barn door would fly open with opportunities and guidance and people willing to help us and figure out how to do this storytelling journey. My favorite story and favorite example of that flow is that whenever I would think about this project before we left, I also had the thought, we need to upgrade our camera gear to shoot in 4K. Now the difference of 4K and 1080, 4K is basically the size of screen you can watch it on. It'll look good on a cell phone or it'll look good on a movie theater screen. I didn't know the end goal, but I didn't want to be cheap when it came to God. However, upgrading camera gear was going to cost $7,000. So I put it on my credit card, crossed my fingers, forgot about it. After that, a few freelance jobs came our way. We didn't think about it. However, we had not been hired for freelance work in a decade, but we didn't think about it. Until several days before we left for the pilgrimage, my mom took us to a bank in Las Cruces, New Mexico to open our business account. And we deposited the checks from these random freelance jobs. So Peter got out his cell phone calculator to write out the deposit slip at the bank. Out of curiosity, I started trying to remember, how much did we pay out for that camera gear? What was the exact amount? Pull up my credit card bill. I look at the deposit slip. I look back at the credit card bill. The difference was $1.91. $1.91. Of course I cried. And then I analyzed it. Why $1.91? If it could be $1.91, it could be zero. And because of my lack of knowledge of scripture at the time, I Googled it. Psalm 91, verse 4. He will cover you in his feathers, and under his wings you will find refuge. Which to me, I interpreted as, if we continue to follow these divine nudges and to leap when we feel called, we will be divinely protected. Once we started walking, transformation started quickly. We're at day 3 now, and that was just before one of the biggest transformational nights. And on day 30, I should point out, we documented with video, so we were documenting. But on day 30, 3 strangers asked me the same question 3 different times. And that question was, are you journaling? And my answer was no. So I started to write, and I'd like to read to you from my journal because it talks about the biggest challenge that I got to deal with on the Camino, which was depression. The sun was just out for a moment, but I can still see the dark clouds above the mountains that brought challenges to our morning walk. Kind of like knowing I'm in a good place now, but there are dark things from my past that can still cloud my mind. Dark as in sadness. The only word I could find to describe it to people was darkness. Sometimes I didn't even realize it was there until months after it was gone. I can feel it coming on. The temper shortens, my face flattens, as compared to being round during a smile. Peter says he can see it happening and calls it putting up my wall. If God is warmth, openness, trust, and love, this is the opposite of that. I don't enjoy it. However, some part of my being must love it. Maybe the part that hates everything, everyone, and doesn't want to be here anymore. That's the worst part, the thought that I don't want to be here anymore. The darkness has the similarity to drinking. If it gets past the early stages, it stays a while, and it's even harder to get out of it. It just started raining. On the Camino, I mentioned the most transformational night happened in the town of Zabaldika. It's a really small village, and it's home to a church built in the 1300s. This is that church. We stayed the night in the church's living quarters. Right before I woke up in the next morning, I dreamed I was killed in a car wreck. I wasn't paying attention to the road and the vehicle went sideways quickly. I knew it wasn't good because I was going so fast. I was then pushed into a building, but there wasn't a crash. It was like I was going through a blurred gray tunnel that kept speeding up. In the next scene of the dream, I was in a waiting room. It looked like a 1980s style business office. It was a large circular room with chairs around the outer wall. I was alone. I realized I was dead and figured that was a good thing because I might get to meet God soon. So I waited. Every now and then I'd feel weakness in my arm or a part of the body. I knew people were trying to help my body, but it wasn't happening where I was. Then I saw my body, and 2 giant hands enter a digital version of my body and pump my heart, bringing me back to life. The next morning I told Peter about the dream, and he said, "It sounds like you were resurrected." My hope is that those hands brought me back to life without that long residing darkness, without that part of me, allowing the truer version of me to reside and continue seeking God, His presence, His peace, His guidance. Because when that darkness is ruling over my mind, the only thing that is allowed in is more darkness in the form of anger, jealousy, self-doubt, and depression. I need to confirm this to myself. A part of me died that night in Zabaldika. That part of me died that night in Zabaldika. We finished walking across Spain in roughly 44 days. And by the time we got to the end, which is Finisterre, I felt raw. And I realized last night how to explain that feeling. It was like I went to a Garth Brooks concert last night and had like the best time and sang at the top of my lungs for 3 hours all my favorite songs. And they agreed. They're like, yes, ding, ding. And then your vocal cords would just be so raw and exhausted, but your heart would be full from the experience. That whole feeling is what I had on my insides. And that is what is happening in this video when we recorded our biggest lessons from walking across the country on this 500-mile pilgrimage. And the end of the pilgrimage is to the remains of St. James, which are located inside a cathedral in Santiago. So Santiago in Spanish is James, so the way of St. James is this journey. And these are the lessons from the final night.
The final stop on our Camino journey is to Finisterre, or Fisterra. It's easy to see why in Roman times this was considered the end of the known world. And for us, it is the end of our Camino.
Are you happier now than before you started?
That's a really good question.
To wrap up our experience, we want to share with you the final life lessons that we've learned while walking this pilgrimage. We recorded them in Santiago the night before we left Spain.
One helpful lesson that the Camino taught over and over and over was that when things don't work out, it's because they're going to work out even better the next time. We had that lesson over and over again in the form of, all right, are we going to stay here? No, it's full. Let's go to the next place. Are we going to eat here? No, it didn't work out. Let's go to the next place. Just these subtle lessons on the Camino over and over and over again, like once a day for 6 weeks. And I think it just ingrains in us the next time something bigger doesn't go our way. We might think, oh, that was a failure. Well, was it? We don't know yet. So every single time that something doesn't go your way, just remember that God has your back. That if something doesn't work out, it's just because something better is around the corner. Or you need to learn some really hard lesson, but you're going to be so much stronger in the end. I think I'm more in a place to accept people where they are. I think at times I've felt like I needed to, change a family member or change people to be better or to fit what I expected of them or hoped for them. I just feel like I am ready to just be present and just enjoy people and meet people where they are. I think the number one lesson that I would share with people, even if they aren't physically able to walk the Camino, is that if something is not right in your life, make a change. It can be something subtle, it's just changing a daily habit, or it could be something extremely dramatic like what we did, quitting our jobs, getting rid of all of our stuff, and walking across the country. But make the change. Because if something isn't exactly how you want it to be, your life is not fulfilling, or you feel like there's something missing, or just something is off, act on that feeling, because it's not going to fix itself.
Are you happier now than before you started?
I feel like the word happy isn't the goal. Just a feeling of being neutral for me, I think, is the goal. Like, instead of the ups and downs, just kind of somewhere neutral in the middle. So in a high stress situation, not being stressed. Or in like a sad situation, realizing that there will always be ups and downs, but just maintaining a more level state of mind and just being calm.
And I was so calm. From Spain, we went to Israel for 10 days. We camped in the north and stayed with a woman who lives there named Rosemary. And then we spent several days in the Old City in Jerusalem, where we got to walk and follow in Jesus' footsteps on the Via Dolorosa. And that is where we saw this image on the wall. And it says, God is love. Arabic is on the top, of course, English in the middle, and Hebrew is on the bottom. From there, we went to India. We spent 6 weeks traveling to sacred places of various religions. We sat under the tree where the Buddha received enlightenment. We went to an ancient city called Varanasi, or Benares, the abode of Shiva. And this is where people who follow the Hindu faith, they hope to take a dip in the sacred river Ganga, the Ganges, sometime before their life cycle is complete. The very last night of our of our pilgrimage. We were in Noida, India, and that is the next thing I want to read to you about a realization that happened once we finished this 98-day storytelling journey. Toward the end of our longest meditation yet as a couple, 6 hours, Peter and I, along with 100 or so other people, chanted Jai Jai Ram in the basement temple of an ashram outside of New Delhi. An ashram is basically where monks live. Jai Jai Ram has roots in Sanskrit and means victory to God. As we chanted, I realized this was the end of our 3-month pilgrimage. I felt tightness in my throat. It's where emotion seems to get stuck in my body. But this time, it was a good emotion. In the past, it's where anxiety or anger would reside. During a counseling session, I learned that when that tightness comes to my throat, I need to place my hands on my neck and tell my throat, "You're safe. You have nothing to be afraid of." I continued chanting Jai Jai Ram, Jai Jai Ram, feeling the peaceful vibration from the chant resonate in my throat. My vocal cords started to relax. Jai Jai Ram, Jai Jai Ram. I wanted to use that new vibration of peace, love, and gratitude at a time when I needed it earlier in my life, during my breaking points. They were the moments when I didn't have the strength to speak up for myself. I mentally went back to my former boss's office. It was the day that ended with me questioning my worth. I saw myself sitting there in his small glassed-in office, throat tight, unable to speak. He said a lot of things that day, and what I heard was, "You'll never be good enough." The worst part was that I believed him. As I sat across from him in his office, the tears started to well up in my eyes and then fall, the first and then the second. And as they fell, I knew I was showing even more weakness by crying, proof that I would never be good enough. And then the vision took a turn. So I imagined myself here in my boss's office, head down, crying. And then it was like I was in the audience of a play, and I didn't know what was going to happen next. It wasn't my own creativity creating a make-believe moment. I was a witness. I saw myself crying, and then I saw a second version of me into the room and sit next to the me that was crying. The second me leaned over and whispered into my ear, "This is the beginning of something beautiful." Dang it, that still makes me cry. The vision continued. I was still crying. Second me, still in here leaning over, and she continued. "I know this is hard right now, and this is going to be difficult for a while, but something great is going to come from this very moment." And in the meditation room, the tears just flowed because I realized how much had happened since that ego-busting moment with a boss who was unstable. I realized that it really uprooted us from my attachment to my career. And from that moment, Peter and I went on this 98-day pilgrimage to some of the holiest places in the world, drawing closer to each other and to God. And it all started with that one challenge. Once the pilgrimage was over, we went home. We didn't have a home, actually. So we went to Peter's mom's house and then to my mom's house. I'm so grateful to be loved. And during the same time, I got a phone call by my former general manager from NBC-5, a man that I greatly respect and is amazing and a great supporter. And he told me something kind of cryptic. He said, "Yeah, we're launching this new lifestyle show. It's all positive. It'll be community focused, everything good. No news about it. Would I be interested in hosting that show?" And he didn't tell me anything else about it. I didn't have any other options at the time. However, this choice to go back to the newsroom that was so very difficult for me to leave because I was so attached to my career, it was incredibly challenging. But I made the decision based on two phrases. when two things came to my mind when I thought about this job offer. It was unexpected opportunities and you'll need the people in the building. When those two phrases came to my mind, I would get chills on my arms. And because of the lesson I learned during Rome that gave me the strength to leave my career, I then had to trust the same chills to bring me back to continue the career. We launched Texas Today, shared one episode. At the time, it was just 1 day a week. And then the pandemic hit, and I was sent home for 2 months with pay. I couldn't leave the apartment. We tried really hard to take advantage and travel. Bad idea. So we stayed in the apartment. And then I had 2 months to edit the hours and hours of footage that we shot during our Camino pilgrimage. We had 300 minutes of edited footage. I cut that down to 1 hour 42 minutes, and I posted it on YouTube. And then we got a text message from someone in Tulsa, Oklahoma, who works at a nonprofit theater there that I used to promote when I was a reporter in Tulsa. And he said, "Hey, I think your journey could be helpful to people. I think we should show it on the movie theater. So let's have a premiere in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Oh, and I'm so glad it's shot in 4K because 2 weeks before the event, we're getting a new projector and it shows in 4K. $1.91 paid off. And then it came to my pilgrimage journal, what parts that I read to you today. I typed it all up and I sent it to a girlfriend from high school that was my English study buddy. And she read it and said, "Hey, I see this as a book. I think this could be helpful to people who read it." So we started going back and forth and editing it. But when it came to the final edit, to my final job, I got scared. I poured my soul onto those pages. All the dirt is on those pages. What if people read them? What if they judge them? What if they think I'm crazy? What if they suck? All these things. So I avoided it. I was like, nope, I'm declaring to the universe, which is a very dangerous thing to do, that I am not an author. I should learn not to declare things, but so I declared it, not an author. 2 days later, I didn't realize this at the time, but 2 days later was the 2-year anniversary from the day that we left for our storytelling pilgrimage. 2 years to the day. Peter and I were shooting a story in Costa Rica, a travel adventure. And our first full day, the clouds were ominous. It seemed like it was the beginning of a storm or the leftovers of a storm. First full day, we take a surfing lesson. And the surfing lesson was a success. That is me actually riding a wave, floating on water and a little bit out of focus and blurry. We did well. At the very end of that lesson, I fall into the water. And when I come up, at the exact same moment, a wave pushed my surfboard right into my throat. And I fall into the water, and I hold my throat. And the only thing in my mind is, I need help. I need help. I need help. But that plea was silent because my voice was gone. We spent 9 days in a Costa Rican hospital. And this was the second most spiritual experience of my life because it was complete surrender. I had absolutely no control. All I could do was connect with my body because it was in charge of healing itself, because surgery was not an option. And because of our Faith Walk Camino experience, we knew to document everything and to journal and to take notes on the blessings and the lessons. And I'd like to share with you my favorite. And that was whenever actually a few days before the accident happened, I noticed a synchronicity in my checking and savings account. And my checking account started with 16 and my savings account started with 116. And I thought, oh neat, that's never happened. We get the initial estimate from the hospital that I would have to pay before I'm allowed to leave the hospital. And it started with 116. And I thought, oh my goodness, 116. I remembered the moment that the surfboard hit my throat and thinking, I need help, I need help. But even in that moment, I knew that that call was not for someone on the beach. It was for any divine being in existence that could hear my plea. 1:16. Googled scripture 1:16. For I love the Lord because he heard my voice. He heard my cry for mercy. I bawled in the hospital. The bill was also the same amount in my checking account. I had enough. No matter what that number was, I had enough. And I'm so grateful for travel insurance and that the bill was not 1:16 with a whole bunch of zeros after it. But still, so many gifts, so many gifts. I came back to work and saw a former coworker in the newsroom, and he said, God, why are your journeys such journeys? And I thought about it for a couple days, and then I remembered, because I asked for it. The final story I'll share with you is the very first story that launched all of this. Before I tell you, I forgot to mention that when I lost my voice, I was out of work for a month because you can't work in television and not talk. Well, at this moment, that's not the deal. So I had a month to finally finish my edit, which got published, self-published. So we finally finished the project. I don't suggest being injured to get out of work and finish your passion projects, though. So let's get to the final story that is the very first story. It was a couple of years before I met Paige Park. We were in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I started to ask the question, is this it? Is this all there is to life? What else? Through yoga, we found meditation, which led us to a silent meditation retreat in India. We get there, my bags are long gone, they never arrive. I never took Peter's last name, and so there was no evidence we were married, so we didn't get to stay together. I'm staying by myself in a new country, don't speak the language, and it was the first time that I had a whole week to myself. Now that sounds kind of lovely, doesn't it? But it was not a pleasant place to be in here, in silence, by myself, completely unattached from every ego support of my looks and my career and who I am. I was stripped of everything. After a really rough week of dealing with depression in here, I had a realization that everything I was spending my time on, my career, my looks, my relationships, those are all temporary. The only thing I had coming into this world is the only thing I have going out of it, and that's God. So why wasn't I dedicating any time to him? After I realized that, I had an overwhelming feeling of love, and I speed walked to the most sacred place on the ashram grounds, and I laid face down and belly down on the ground, and I said, I'm yours. God, I am yours. Do whatever you want with me. Do whatever you want with me. And here I am with you, sharing stories that have happened since that moment more than a decade ago. Stories that I hope remind you of what you already know, that you too have your own stories. Stories of $1.91 when you had everything you needed. Stories of sesame chips when God told you that he was with you in such a personal way that only you would know. And stories about this moment in this room with all these sweet, strong women sitting at these tables and in these chairs, at least 1 foot on the ground, our hips rooted in the seat, taking a breath in and a breath out. That this moment is the beginning of something beautiful. Thank you for listening.